Hi, I'm Adrienne Pasquarelli, Special Projects Editor and Senior Reporter at Ad Age, and welcome to another edition of the Marketer's Brief podcast, our weekly discussion about marketing news and trends that have the industry buzzing. In recent years, many new brands have emerged in the banking space, offering new incentives to attract younger consumers. The increased competition is leading to new marketing strategies from established brands such as PNC Bank, which was founded in 1865. Today, we'll be talking with Jenn Garbach, Chief Marketing Officer at PNC Bank. She'll discuss the bank's new Brilliantly Boring brand platform, new trends in banking, and what's ahead as a focus. Now, here's my conversation with Jenn. Hi, Jenn. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So you're relatively new to PNC, having joined about a year ago. How did your previous work in finance prepare you for this job?
It's funny, in many ways, I feel like I had a training ground over my time at Capital One and PayPal leading up to joining PNC. So I've spent over a decade at Capital One across the retail and direct bank, various parts of the card organization, and all of those going through different types of transformations that really set up for this opportunity coming into PNC, where the business as a whole is on this incredible growth trajectory, kind of sitting at the top of the super regional banks and really going through its maturity curve of as we have our sights set on big national scale, it's an opportunity to rethink brand marketing and how we can really position ourselves as a growth engine for the business. And so it's been a really nice kind of segue from some of my prior roles and opportunities to bring that experience across different disciplines into this new role.
And when you joined, what was your first priority? I know you guys have a new agency and you recently came out with a new campaign, but what was first on the agenda back last spring?
It was definitely getting our new agency of record, Arnold Worldwide, onboarded. And we had our sights set right from the jump on establishing a brand refresh. So as part of this kind of growth trajectory, knowing that we need to think differently about how we position PNC and how we really tell our story in a much more compelling breakthrough way. So job number one was get sorted with our new agency and really start paving the runway for our brand refresh.
How did you choose Arnold? Was there a review that you set into motion, or how did that process work for you
We did. We
guys?
went through the traditional kind of RFP process, met with a number of different partners or potential partners, and really felt strongly that Arnold brought incredible creative chops, but also we're a really great cultural fit. I think they see who we are and kind of our starting point, but also shared the aspirations of where we can grow the business to. And so we felt really strong through those early conversations that they were going to bring kind of the strategic thinking, the creative skill sets to be able to meet us where we are, but also push us in a really thoughtful way to contemplate some new strategies, some new ways that we might want to represent ourselves out in the marketplace.
And one of those ways to represent you guys in the marketplace was this new national campaign, which just rolled out very recently this year. And that's the first major work from Arnold. Can you tell
That's
us a
right.
bit about that push?
Yeah, so our new campaign platform, PNC Bank, Brilliantly Boring Since 1865, is a really fun and exciting new kind of storytelling journey for us. Traditionally, PNC has been a bit more kind of under the radar, operating with the philosophy of we do great work. We have been this steady, reliable, trustworthy bank for over 160 years, but there's a need to really tell that story in a powerful and breakthrough way. And working with our partners at Arnold, they really pushed us to say, hey, let's explore what the safe zone is. If we stay in the territory of what we've been doing, what does that look like? And it gets us more of what we'd already been doing, which is not being able to break through and compete with the other big national players who, have bigger budgets than we do and are able to tell their story in a louder, more consistent way. And so we had to be really smart and say, how do we cut through? How can we do something that's really authentic to who PNC is, but do that in a more creative way that allows us to differentiate? And so that was the push for Brilliantly Boring, was finding that kind of core truth about who we are as a bank, the thing that's always been true about our philosophy towards money, towards that steady, reliable, And I joke that it's our I Heart Nerds moment. It's kind of wearing that badge with honor of that boring, steady philosophy is actually what makes us really differentiated and unique. And this has been a fun opportunity to wrap that in a really creative storytelling construct and go to market in a way that you can't miss it, right? And you can't really confuse it with anybody else out there. And so that's been a really powerful way for us to evolve how we're going to market today.
Yeah, boring is pretty catchy. When a brand calls itself boring, it's not usually such a good thing, but here it seems like it's working. What kind of feedback are you seeing?
We're loving it. So first, internally, I think it's been wonderful that we have a ton of, momentum internally with our team who I think have been waiting for this powerful kind of new narrative to latch on to. So we've certainly got the internal, heads cocked sideways when we rolled this out of like, I don't know if I want to call myself boring. And as we explain that we're not calling ourselves boring, we're embracing the philosophy of boring and how it enables brilliant outcomes. I think a lot of folks found themselves in that of you're right. Like what I do is very methodical and rigorous, but it enables all these brilliant outcomes. And as we then externalize that, I think it's very culturally resonant today as you think about kind of what's been happening over the last 12 to 18 months in the financial services industry as a whole and some of the cycles that have repeated over the last couple of decades. But there's also the notion of, yeah, I do want my bank to be a steady, reliable, trustworthy partner. And so it's landing. And it's also, like you said, it's catchy. It gives folks something to look at and hold on to and be like, oh, like we see you, what's going on over there? Like, let's engage. So overall, really, really pleased with the feedback, both externally and internally, and a lot more to come.
What kind of work did you do before? Was there a brand tagline previously, or kind of how did PNC position itself before this new campaign?
We did. We still had a national brand campaign, and it was under the platform of moving all forward financially. And so I put it in the category of it was a very nice platform, but it wasn't particularly powerful or differentiated. So we talk a lot about that thumb test, that if you held your thumb up over the logo that was showing up on, the TV spot, would you know that that was a PNC Bank spot, or could that have been any other bank? And so there was a lot of goodness in what we were doing before, but it wasn't particularly breakthrough. And you could see where it could feel like any other kind of big super regional bank or regional. And in a world where we're really trying to differentiate and demonstrate what we know to be true about ourselves, which is we have the capabilities of the big national players, but we have the goodness of knowing our local markets and communities. We need to be able to pass that thumb test that no, it is truly PNC and only PNC with that message. So we feel really, really excited that this is a new chapter for us in how we're bringing our brand to market and telling that story.
And what about from the media angle? I mean, where did the campaign appear on which marketing channels? Was anything new there in terms of your strategy?
Yeah, so we've traditionally been in kind of all the traditional media channels that you would expect. Some of the new things for us this time around are pushing more into kind of streaming, some of the podcast space. We also have always had a number of big sponsorships, but the new brand platforms creating new opportunities for us to bring that directly into those sponsorships. So that's one of the other big opportunities for us that you'll see even more coming over the back half of the year. So recently, you may have seen a new Boring Before Brilliance content series that launched featuring our partnership with Chip Ganassi Racing and PNC Car Number 9, which is driven by Scott Dixon. That's been a partnership that's been long branded with PNC. And now we've got this new construct to say, hey, how do we take that asset and really dial up the storytelling? And with Scott, it was such a cool opportunity to spotlight the parallels before that Boring Before Brilliance of, if you're not a racing fan, there is a ton of crunching the numbers and data analysis that goes into the pre-race and post-race routines. And so we're able to take folks on that journey of understanding how Scott applies kind of that philosophy as a driver. And what it, enables is some of the fastest, most exciting racing that you see out on the IndyCar track and some of his big wins as of recent. So you'll see more and more of that coming from us over the remainder of the year and into next year as we think about activating in really fun and unique ways and pulling in more of that buzzworthy kind of PR angles that haven't really been a core part of our strategy in the past.
Who handles your media buying? Is that done internally or?
We have a team internally, and they partner with Havas Media, who's the parent company for Arnold Worldwide. So we partner with both Arnold and Havas.
And has that relationship, was that in existence for a long term or is that new?
That's been part of the new shift in our agency partnership, and they have been fantastic. So when we talk about that powerhouse of really rethinking comprehensively not only the creative strategy but the media strategy, that's been a really important part of us rethinking kind of, we don't need to be set in the routines of the past, right? Bring everything and all the good new thinking to the table, and we've had that in spades with Arnold and Havas partners.
So as you mentioned, PNC will mark 160 years of business next year. How can this history be a benefit and also a challenge when you think about marketing to consumers today?
Yeah, it's I talk about there are tension points, right, for all of us in our businesses, and I think that longevity is a tension point. On the one hand, there's the steady, reliable history of being able to point to, we've been around and we have weathered economic cycles and all sorts of changes and done really well for our customers and clients throughout that. On the other side, there can be a perception that a bank that has been around for 160 years is maybe stodgy or set in its ways and not as nimble, agile, dynamic, and some of those. And so it's finding that balance, which again, I think is at the core of what we are, which is the yes and. We are 160 years old, and touting that as a marker of stability, and then also dimensionalizing through that. We have been really thoughtful about when and where we innovate, where we evolve, and where we hang on to the things that have been really meaningful to create that stability over time. And we know that that's important from a consumer perspective as well, that as folks are looking around and saying they have their choice of banks, there are capabilities that they are looking for of, digital first, branches on, their street corner that have access, but they're also looking for, how do I know that this bank's going to be around, right? And that's even more top of mind for folks than it, previously was. And so I think that's one of the opportunities for us to lean into of, there's a yes and, right? That it's not necessarily set in our ways in a way that doesn't demonstrate evolution, but a goodness in the stability and the learnings of that long tenure.
Yeah, that kind of is probably helpful with some of the digital upstarts that have been popping up in the last decade or so. I mean, you mentioned competition from national brands who have these big budgets, but there's also a fair amount of new brands in the marketplace that are also trying to attract customers for their banking needs.
That's right. I think the competition is coming from every angle at this point, right? Whether it's the regional banks and community banks, it's the big nationals, it's the fintechs, it's the Amazons, the Walmarts, where those rungs are getting wider and wider of where they're casting their net and playing in the space. And you're right, it creates even more choice in the marketplace for consumers, and all the more reason we have to be very focused and ensure that the PNC brand shows up clearly of who we are, where we are, and what we can serve for customers.
What are you noticing about differences in generations in terms of how younger consumers bank versus older consumers, what they're looking for, and how do you take that into account when you think about your marketing?
Absolutely. Well, one thing is, there was a point in time earlier in my career where we really talked about digital banking services as a differentiator, and those have wholly become table stakes, right? So that is just part of the initial considerations that we need to make sure that we are up to par. And as we think about our marketing and the shopping journey and path to purchase, we need to make sure that those are showing up really clearly in, like, yes, absolutely, we are here, but those are not going to be the big differentiators anymore. I think the other thing that's really shifted is where younger generations are consuming their content and financial literacy, right? So again, a decade ago, we weren't talking about some of these social platforms as the targets for how you reach younger generations and help them understand core financial services as a pathway to actually, drive them to purchase. And so it's a different ballgame thinking about how we connect, how we get that content out there, how we get our brand out there. And then the last piece that's, again, very interesting, watching the arc of folks are going back to branches again. And so it's really interesting that it's now this corresponding, I want my physical branch and I want digital capabilities. And so that also signals that when folks go to our branches, they want more advanced kind of advisory services, more guidance, more support, and they want to be able to do a lot of self-service digital banking. And that's very different than, we saw kind of over the last decade, a lot more of, hey, folks moving out of branches, wanting digital only. And now we're seeing a bit of that coming back to the importance of having a branch network in our core markets.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about your bank branch strategy, how that entered into the equation. Do you think that the interest there is part of that need for more financial literacy and just having advisors on standby, or what's driving the interest?
Yeah, well, I think it's a couple of things. I mean, there's also maybe to our prior conversation on there are so many options and competitors out there. I think one of the ways to break through is really in that advisor capacity of how are you the trusted partner of we've got your back, we can help you. There's a lot of noise. It's going to be hard to figure out who to trust and what you need. So there's definitely an element of what's that kind of steady, reliable place I know that I can go to. And in some places, we need to have that content and those opportunities available in digital formats for folks to consume. And then it's also saying there's always going to be these convenience factors of when I actually need cash, when I actually need to talk to a person, when the need is acute, the value of having access to a human has been very consistent. But I think, again, seeing that balance across the digital and physical network is very important and top of mind for us.
Have you changed the number of branches that you have, or made them smaller, or made any changes there?
Yeah, like most banks, we have gone through those journeys of how do we look at our core markets and ensure that they are resourced appropriately, and where we have our presence. We've recently announced a big investment in expanding our branch network. So we're very much committed. And then you'll see, based on some of our expansion markets, where you'll see a lot of new builds coming up. And that's also an opportunity for us with the brand of thinking about those local market takeovers and really showing up really strong in new markets as we're building out those presence. Particularly for us, there's a lot of that focus as we think about moving out west and the true kind of expansion out nationally.
Well, speaking of expansion, what comes next for PNC Bank? How long will this current campaign run, and what's ahead for you as a focus?
Yeah, I think the Brilliantly Boring platform is here to stay for a good long while. We've got some really fun and I think breakthrough new creative coming in the back half of the year, a lot more through our sponsorships. And then we'll continue to evolve this construct into next year. So I think you can look for us to have some, like I said, some of those bigger, more buzzworthy PR activations, some bold new sponsorships showing up in some of those new places. But we're very excited. And I think you're going to see some consistency in what we're doing, which has been a key part of the strategy, right? Is to define this new path and ensure that we are doing that consistent storytelling, but keeping it fun. I think introducing a bit more of the humor and the fun and the lightheartedness that goes behind a campaign like Brilliantly Boring. And then we're going to match that internally with, the power of our investment in brand is also only as good as how effectively we pull that through, right? The rest of the marketing funnel. So we're really focused on getting all of our creative, in this new construct, the investment in our capabilities, and how we're continuing to, support the shopping journey wholesale.
Great. Well, it was wonderful talking to you today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
That was Jenn Garbach, Chief Marketing Officer at PNC Bank, and I'm Adrienne Pasquarelli, Special Projects Editor and Senior Reporter at Ad Age. I'd like to thank our producer, Lauren Ciardio, and invite you to subscribe to the Marketer's Brief podcast on your favorite player. We promise to keep it brief, or at least short enough for your morning coffee. Thanks for tuning in.
Marketer's Brief listeners get $40 off an adage.com subscription. Sharpen your marketing edge and visit adage.com/brief for your discount.